Incoming U.S. President Donald Trump there this week, doubling down on a reference he's made on numerous occasions over the last few weeks, calling on Canada to become the 51st U.S. state. He got specific, though, about how he would make it happen, or how he could make it happen through, quote unquote, and you heard it there, economic force, something MPs who gathered here, Liberal MPs who gathered here on Parliament Hill today, had a lot to say about. Have a listen.
There's no way they're going to take over Canada. I mean, I'd die on the cross fighting for that one.
When President-elect Trump talks, we need to listen, and we need to take him very seriously.
He's not joking at this point.
He is not. He is not, and we are taking it seriously.
Anything that the President of the United States or the President-elect of the United States says needs to be treated with the utmost seriousness.
It's silly. It's unbecoming, frankly, of a president, any president that would say that. But we do have to take it seriously.
And here's Ontario's Premier Doug Ford just moments after meeting with all the other premiers and territorial leaders from across the country this afternoon.
The president has really ramped up his talking points over the last day or two, and we're concerned. We're concerned, but we're a strong country. We're a very strong country when it comes to the critical minerals and energy and manufacturing.
Those premiers are getting back together exactly a week from now here in Ottawa with the Prime Minister. They'll hold their first in-person meeting on this subject. They'll also head, many of them, to Washington, and we now have a date for that, February 12th. Let's talk more about that threat from Donald Trump and how politicians are handling it with our front bench. Saeed Salem, Jamie Ellerton, Carl Belanger, and Marika Walsh are here. Jamie, I'll start with you. There's so much of what's happening with this Liberal leadership race and the decision from Trudeau that is obviously bleeding into this huge threat that we face. Even if you put aside annexation for this blanket tariff to be imposed, 25% send our economy immediately into a recession. How has this, do you think, affected our ability to navigate that or just to respond to Trump?
I think it's had a huge impact on that. The federal government right now is effectively rudderless, and worse, the current prime minister is making it worse. And you don't have to take my word for it. Listen to David McNaughton, who was like the prime minister's chosen ambassador in his first term and longtime Liberal, essentially telling the prime minister to shut up because it's not actually being helpful for the country. And so I think when you look at the fact that now the Liberals are only talking about themselves and are going to be focused so much on their internal dynamics and trying to figure out who the next Liberal leadership's be in the Liberal leadership race, Canada's left in the lurch. And I think that's why you're seeing people like Premier Doug Ford step up and fill that vacuum. I think it's actually quite admirable from a public standpoint that he's kind of leading the charge for Canada actually going down on the U.S. airwaves and carrying a message while our federal government is effectively MIA.
That former ambassador, Carl David McNaughton, was on this show last night at about this time saying essentially that Justin Trudeau should stay out of it. He was critical of or had some criticism for the statement that he put out that there was, no chance in hell that Trump would annex or that the U.S. could annex Canada. At the same time, he said, members of the opposition, premiers, they should be talking on behalf of Canada. Is there a risk to the fact that there is, voices defending Canada at this point and doing so effectively on American airwaves, like Doug Ford, like Danielle Smith, like David Eby, but at the same time, there's no singular voice speaking on behalf of the federal government?
Yeah, and when Justin Trudeau speaks, I mean, the fact is he has nothing to lose anymore. So who knows what he's going to say the next time Donald Trump says something outrageous. This is where Canada is in a very weak position right now because, you saw Doug Ford doing the rounds and he was introduced as the Premier of Canada. Like, they have no idea who this guy is. What we need is a strategy to activate our allies and friends in Washington and across the United States to get those governors of the states that with whom we trade to speak up against those tariffs, to say it will hurt them. So far, they have not been really saying much. Of course, I guess they're using soft diplomacy internally. But for Canada, we need to activate those networks as opposed to just go on media. That's not going to do the trick. You need to have a critical mass of Americans that understand that this will be bad news for both countries.
Looking ahead to that meeting between the premiers and the prime minister, Saeed, does there need to be communication, from the prime minister to the premiers, but ultimately to Canadians and then to Americans about what will happen or what things are under consideration about what could happen if these tariffs are imposed?
There needs to be. And right now there's a leadership void. And right now, Doug Ford is the one who is speaking up. And in many cases, it seems like he's speaking up for a lot of Canadians. So he's winning a lot of political points on that front. But there has to be open dialogue between the Prime Minister and the premiers. And it has to be very clear what the unified position is going to be when it comes to tariff response and when it comes to the response to the U.S. It's so odd that you don't even have members of cabinet, federal cabinet, who are speaking out for the country right now. So this makes Canada look like we are in a position where we do not know where we're going. It looks like no one's at the wheel. And it loses confidence in our ability to demonstrate ourselves as a strong country. So between the
They're taking it very seriously, Syed. They're taking it very seriously.
Well, this is actually like the sadness of it all, though, right? Like you literally have a party that it's like absorbed and obsessed with itself right now, who are talking about 180ing and saying anything and effectively admitting they stand for nothing. All while our literal biggest trading partner and the greatest actual threat to our country in probably 70 plus years is essentially being a Fox News fodder and punchlines between Tucker Carlson and SNL. Like, it's an absolute embarrassment for Canada that the Liberal Party is forcing the country through this.
And if the position were reversed, and if you actually
I just want to bring. Yeah, go ahead. Finish quickly. I just want to get in Marika as well.
If the position were reversed and you actually had U.S. governors speaking up on behalf of the United States, it would look extremely odd, not just to Canadians, but also worldwide.
Yeah, I take that point for sure. Their system is a bit different, but that does make sense. And I take the point also about sort of this, drama internally while there is such an external threat, Marika. I'm not sure it's fair to subscribe, like say all of MPs in the Liberal Party wanted it to happen this way. I think if they had their choice, the Prime Minister would have quit a long time ago. But I also think it's going to be a question the Prime Minister keeps getting. Like, did you wait too long and keep yourself in place, essentially, and leave us in a weaker position vis-a-vis these negotiations?
Yeah, and Patrick Weiler, BC MP, essentially said that today. There was lots of decision points, he said, that the Prime Minister could have made in the last 6 months, so they weren't in this time frame. But I think it's also a bit overblown that this is actually that different than what it was before December 16th. Donald Trump already knew that the Prime Minister was severely weakened, that he had internal fighting. And so I'm not actually sure how much that changes where they are now. The internal fighting was happening before Justin Trudeau announced his resignation, and now it's happening in a different context. What is very different, and what I think that the federal government hasn't really addressed, is how much more powerful Donald Trump is. How much more we see members of Congress, the Senate, coalescing around him. Governors are not speaking out because they know Donald Trump controls the Republican Party in a way that he did not in his first term, and he is so much more powerful for that.
It's such a great point.
So we're more weak while he's stronger.
It's a great point, Carl, because Germany is, to my knowledge, the only thing I could find, and I think it was Mike LeCouture who found it for me this morning, the only G7 country jumping to our defense. We're not hearing anything from NATO. I mean, he's literally talking about making the border between our two countries artificial and using economic force to do so. And there aren't governors talking up. There aren't CEOs talking out. Like, hopefully they eventually will, but we're getting pretty close to the day he says he's going to impose these tariffs, too.
Yeah, well, hopefully a Republican will start talking to Donald Trump about how bad politically it would be for that party if you were to bring in Canada and all the Democrat great electors that would come with it. Because there's no question that Canadians, would not be happy with this kind of result and would certainly punish that party if annexation was actually becoming a thing.
Okay, I got to leave it there.